was born in Belfast, Northern Ireland, immigrated to the United States in 1955. I was a pattern maker by trade. I worked as in Fisher 23, got let off there, and went to the tech center, General Motors Styling, which is now General Motors Design Staff. And that's when I joined the UAW. Let me address two things before I set things my remarks, and that is that on my left-hand side here is my very dear, lifelong friend, one of the most dedicated labor union people I've ever met, who's been an ally with me in many of the battles, and all of the battles that we took on up until my retirement, and he went on after that. Let me say that Bill, on many occasions, was a whole lot more radical than I was, and taught me to do a lot of things. The second thing I'd like to say is that when I joined the UAW in '55, I could basically say that it was the most progressive and honest union in the American trade union movement. Having said that, of course, you would have to take a look at the American trade union movement. Anyhow, I joined in 1955, and I was working at General Motors Design Staff. I got elected to be a committeeman, and the first thing that I went to was a General Motors Council, where Leonard Woodcock was the director. And I noticed that when I sat down that they presented us with all of the materials, General Motors pension plan, General Motors healthcare plan, General Motors this, General Motors that, General Motors other things. This disturbed me very much because I had learned and read a lot about the history of the UAW, and I knew full well that none of those benefits was given to us by General Motors. Each one of those benefits you could point to a strike, and you could point to the sacrifice that workers made to carve that out of General Motors. And so I got to the floor, and I became very critical. My first criticism of the international movement, in stating that I can't understand that I'm sitting here in a union meeting, and I'm being presented by my union leadership, printed by union people, calling these General Motors programs. I said, these are not General Motors programs, these are UAW programs, in which I got a very sounding applause. And with the result of that, to cut the long story short, the next time I went to General Motors Council, there in front of me was GM UAW benefits, GM UAW pension. And Leonard Woodcock came up to me and showed me it as I was waiting outside before the council started. He says, "Are you happy now?" And I said, "No. If anything, it should be UAW GM."
Ah, right.
That was my first criticism of UAW. Okay, we also got into the earlier part, which not too many people know about, which was one of the first things. It was the dollar an hour movement. It started actually in Local 600 with Bob King. Not Bob King, the regional director, but another friend of mine, Bob King. And he started a dollar an hour. At that particular point in time, the building trades were receiving tremendous amount of wages. I mean, increases and doing very, very well. And this prompted the people in the skilled trades, electricians, whatever, all of these building trades, we were lagging far behind. The result of it, in simple terms, is local, for the dollar an hour movement, we got at the contract 50 cents for skilled trades, and I believe that the production got a 30-cent increase. Success. So because I hear of all these failures today, and I'm telling you what I'm going to relate to is the things that we've done that were successful. And that's the most important thing. The second thing that happened to us was basically in 1967, for whatever reason, beyond any understanding whatsoever, the first concession was made to General Motors by Walter Reuther. A 16-cent cap was placed on the cost of living. For whatever reason I do not know, actually the cost of living came apart in 1960. It was C.E. Wilson who proposed to Walter Reuther this cost of living based on the Consumer Price Index, because he wanted labor peace. Okay? And that was accepted and taken up. Now, up to 1967, General Motors had, for the 30 years previous to that, made billions and billions of dollars. There was no talk of bankruptcy. General Motors was the largest corporation in the world, and a highly profitable one. I think in that last year, $4 billion. $4 billion then, I'm not an economist, I don't know what it would relate to today, but they were making money. Why concessions? I will never know. However, that started another movement that we started. Restore the cost of living. And for the 3 years of that contract, the United National Caucus, which the organization that we formed, put out papers. And a brother Fox from Local 600 was a brilliant man with figures. And in each one of those 3 months or 6 months, whatever we could afford to put those papers out, we put it out with telling each auto worker what they had lost in working 30 hours, 48 hours, or 54 hours. And the figure was getting to be astronomical. That made the #1 issue in the 1970 negotiations to restore the cost of living. That went like wildfire throughout the entire union.
Restore and more.
Restore and more. Now I want to tell you about the cost of living. For each auto worker who is prior to these cut wages or whatever the hell they're doing, half of your wages, at least half of your wages, was attributed to the cost of living. Half. If you were a $20 an hour man before these two-tiered wage system, 10 of it, I can guarantee you, was achieved by the cost of living. So anyhow, in 1970, this was the major thing. Unfortunately, we know the death of Walter and May Reuther preceded the contract of 1970. Woodcock was elected the president. Anyhow, the last thing on that table, after 10 weeks of strike, was Woodcock walked up the back stairs to the then General Motors, where he was, and told him that he could never go down and sell this unless we got the cost of living back. The cost of living was restored. We won! Only by the same type of a handful of people that started out in the same, just the same as you were doing today. There's a defeatist attitude about this, and you should lose it quick. In 1970, okay. In 1970, it was the cost of living was restored. After that, there was this locals opposed to concessions and several other things. Bill will probably be able to inject some. However, I became the president of Local 160, and I got elected to be the top negotiator in 1984. By the way, after I was elected from Sub-Council 8, which was the Engineering Skilled Trades Council, and number 10, Sub-Council 10 was the Maintenance Trades, Sub-Council 8 was eliminated.
They combined.
Somebody has told me they eliminated the region because of it directly. I mean, these are the things that these people do.
Right.
You understand?